Good morning, everyone. It's very good to see everyone here today, and to all of you that are watching on YouTube TV. We're excited that you're here and excited for this event. Want to greet everyone and say good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. And want to introduce our three panelists today and really dive right into the issue at hand for this Inside Med Admissions inaugural broadcast. We're going to talk at the end of the broadcast about what next month we're going to be talking about, and we will let you know throughout the month kind of how that's gonna play out. But we'll talk more about that at the end. So let me introduce our three experts for the day. I am Dr. Scott Wright, and many of you know me already by virtue of our various broadcasts and YouTube videos, etc. I am Vice President for Academic Advising at MAPT and former Director of Admissions at UT Southwestern Med School and Executive Director of the Texas Medical and Dental Schools Application Service. And so it's nice to see you all here today. And we have three esteemed experts that are going to be chiming in on this crucial issue of COVID and how it's affecting things, and want to introduce them to you right now. First of all, we have Filomeno Maldonado, who I know is Philo, and Philo is the Associate Dean of Admissions and Assistant Professor of Medical Humanities at Texas A&M University College of Medicine in Bryan, College Station, Texas. Philo, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, Scott.
Oh,
thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's really great to see you, and thank you for joining us. And I see your A&M mug in the background, and so that's right. Awesome. Giga Maggies, right? Yeah, that's right. Our next panelist is Dr. Leila Harrison, who is Senior Associate Dean for Student Affairs and Admissions and Clinical Assistant Professor at the Elson S. Floyd College of Medicine at Washington State University. And I believe I'm right in saying that's in Spokane, Washington. Is that right, Leila? Yeah, awesome. And so thank you for joining us. I hope it's the weather out there doing okay today?
Yeah, Pacific Northwest has amazing weather, so it's beautiful.
Oh, good. That's awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, Leila. It's really, really nice to see you today. Then our third panelist is the Director of Admissions at Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine, and that is Lyman Mower. Lyman, how are you this morning?
Hey, good morning, Scott. Thanks for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here today.
Yeah, great. It's great to see you. And now I'm trying to remember, is Michigan State is in Lansing? Is that correct? Is that where the med school is?
The main Michigan State campus is in East Lansing, so right next door to the capital city of Lansing in Michigan. With respect to our college, we split our pre-clerkship students among three sites. The majority of them are in East Lansing on the main campus, but we have two additional sites in Southeast Michigan. So in the center of Detroit and in Macomb County as well.
Great. Oh, awesome. Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank the three of you for joining us today. It's great to see you. And I think Philo, we're going to start off with you and pose the question to you, and that is, how do you anticipate that COVID will affect the 21-22 application cycle? It's a kind of an open-ended question, and feel free to to discuss whatever you think is relevant to that question.
Okay. Interestingly, we are going to proceed like we did in 2020. We're still not out of the woods, unfortunately, and the committee has decided to exercise some of the same measures that we implemented in 2020. In fact, most of our sister institutions in the state of Texas, our TMDSAS participating schools, are going to do very similarly. In fact, in 2020, we decided to extend our deadline by a month and also extend interviews into January and early February. we like the timeline so much that we're going to continue that time indefinitely going into the future, starting with 2021. So instead of an October 1st deadline, we're going to have a November 1st deadline. And then we also moved the match. As you know, Texas is unique in that we have the medical school match in addition to pre-match offers between October and December. We've extended that period through the end of January for pre-match offers, and then moved the match from February 1st to early March, or the first, I think this past in 2021 it's March 5th. Next year it'll be March 4th. So that allowed us to see more applicants and obviously to adapt to the applicants that were affected by the cancellation of MCAT scores or MCAT tests, I'm sorry, and then the rescheduling of that, and perhaps as well the delays that some of our faculty and health professions advisory committees may have experienced as a result of shutting down, for a period of time and going online for the most part, that perhaps coming together to actually discuss the applicants and compose their letters probably was impeded in some way. So we know that there were some delays there. So we obviously adapted to that. And we, along with our sister institutions in the state of Texas, decided to keep the requirement of the MCAT. I know that some of our institutions nationwide, I think a handful of those, decided that they were not going to consider the MCAT. We decided against that, but we did exercise flexibility in terms of those that were applying late. Some of our institutions here in Texas decided to interview candidates without an MCAT, pending, the MCAT at a later date, and reevaluating them after that. We did, similarly, but for the most part, we found that most of our applicants, had their MCAT, scores, and didn't affect the pool as significantly as we thought. In addition, we considered online, coursework, particularly for the prerequisites, and didn't in any way penalize students for taking that approach given the circumstances. We also made exceptions for pass-fail courses, particularly within the prerequisites. Some institutions did not provide the students the option of graded courses, even online, but A&M did, UT did, among others. So if students had the option of doing graded, we encouraged them to do that. But if they decided to go, to do pass-fail, we accepted, the pass-fail nevertheless. So those are some of the things that we did in 2020, and we're going to continue into 2021. We are going to continue virtual, and as opposed to, in person. I know some of our sister institutions in Texas might go a hybrid, but for the most part, it looks like all of us are going to go virtual for 2021.
Okay, great. Leila, I'll pose this same question to you and get you to kind of bounce off of what Philo has said and kind of add to it your perspective. Being an AMCAS school, things are a little bit different for you guys as opposed to the Texas process. So the question is equal to you, Leila, and how do you anticipate it's going to affect you guys in 2020, 21, 22?
Yeah, so I think looking forward into the next cycle, so I'm also on the AAMC, the AAMC Committee on Admissions. So we do talk broadly nationally about issues related to admissions. So just kind of the collective thoughts or anticipation of things that might be different or more exacerbated this coming cycle is we anticipate that applicants might have fewer experiences. They might have virtual experiences where we really have not seen much of that kind of thing, like virtual shadowing, virtual volunteering. We also anticipate issues related to letters of recommendation. Traditional students have had to be, in many cases, online in this past year, and some have conveyed that has made it difficult to get to know their faculty member that, in a traditional sense, had they been in person, might be writing a letter of recommendation. So letters of recommendation might look different. So they might read differently in terms of the depth that they have had in getting to know the applicant. So I think those are just some of the things. I think across the country, we're seeing that I would say the majority of medical schools are likely going to be continuing with virtual interviews, but some are also considering having sort of additional second looks, or for those that they accepted coming back to campus, or even those that they had interviewed virtually to come back before acceptance to view the campus. One of the things I think is going to be really important for medical schools, it always is important, but especially this coming cycle, is to be really transparent about what they expect of their applicants. I think a lot of anxiety for applicants right now is the uncertainty of what schools really are looking for, what they require, what's different in these two cycles during the pandemic. So I just think we're going to see more in this coming cycle, that applications are going to look different than what we're used to. And it's going to be really important that we're all training our admissions committees and interviewers to be thoughtful of that, and to really take into consideration that applicants have, they don't have the same control of their environment or opportunities that they might have pre-pandemic. So just broadly, I mean, for our program, a lot of these are true as well. So, but those are the things that we are hearing nationally. Can't hear you, Scott.
Sorry, a lot of angst from students that are trying to traverse this process, and we're hearing the same kind of thing that you guys are hearing. So absolutely, that's great. Lyman, same question for you. Like to know from your perspective, both in terms of your institution, but also in some ways sort of somewhat representative, at least for our purposes today, of osteopathic medicine and the process for osteopathic medical schools through ACOMAS. And what are your thoughts about how you guys and how osteopathic schools are dealing with COVID?
Sure, I'll try to be a fair representative here of my peer institutions on the osteopathic side of things. I was among probably those individuals who were skeptical that there would be too many impacts to the 2021 application cycle due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Certainly, we did see some significant disruption, especially as Philo has alluded to, with respect to the way the AAMC had to be very responsive around making changes to the administration of the MCAT. The situation that many test takers needed to face was a little bit unconventional, a little bit different. Scores needed to be graded and then released in a different type of way. So certainly there were some logistical hurdles that I think the applicant pool needed to manage. But I think in terms of preparation, this pool was not significantly impacted. And as we started to enter this period about a year ago, my thoughts were really much more with the individuals considering an application to medical schools this cycle and really over the next 2, perhaps 3 cycles. As people who have started college in this environment have probably just had the worst college freshman year in the history of college freshman years. Right? Right. So this is so I was sensitive to what needed to be different administratively, or what needed to be different maybe in terms of timelines or some of the expectations for the 2021 group. But certainly my heart was much more with people applying for 2022 and beyond. So I would anticipate that many, if not most, if not all, osteopathic schools will probably stay the course in terms of the processes that have served them well over the past year, and then maybe potentially on a geographic basis more than anything, have that opportunity to follow guidelines allowing for increased in-person activities and increased opportunities to physically interact with faculty, staff, students, and campus locations. Certainly with respect to Michigan State, my anticipation for this coming year is that we will have essentially the same interview process that we had this past year. So it will be a virtual one-to-one type of interview, which we think is a format that was very successful. But definitely, I think the changes that will be impacting this group in particular I don't think will be so much logistical. I think part of the new challenge here will be how do applicants effectively communicate their skills, their attributes, the way that they've developed the pre-professional capacities that medical schools are interested in evaluating and assessing. How are they going to communicate that in an environment where they haven't had necessarily the same access to the traditional pathways or the traditional tools that have allowed them to very clearly or more easily or more conventionally articulate exposure to clinical medicine or exposure to volunteerism or a service orientation, or how might they in a more virtual way really articulate strengths around leadership and teamwork and communication and adaptability and resilience. So I think our role as admission professionals is help calibrate some of those changed expectations that committees may need to have, especially with respect to experiences and probably also letters of recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a good question, and I'd like to pose it to each one of you and get you guys to jump in on this. How did you prepare your committees in this last cycle, and how will you prepare your committees in the future cycle to adjust to these things? I'm sure it was difficult to, at some level, for a shift from considering, particularly with longstanding committee members who have been used to looking at things in the specific way, the expectations, for example, of shadowing or clinical hours or whatever. How did you go about training your committees to sort of understand and deal with that in an equitable way, so that it didn't disadvantage students as they were coming into your process? Phila, you want to respond to that first?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Good question. Interestingly, the pool coming or going in 2020, and for the most part, had medically related experience, had service, leadership. Many of those things were already there, given the fact that, they were already in the pipeline, to apply for, 2020. So now they were affected going forward, right? So we think that this pool, this application cycle, we're going to see students who were maybe sophomores or juniors now coming into the process for 2021 that were affected, obviously, for in 2020 because of COVID. So we're going to see perhaps a more significant, let's say, dearth, I suppose, of activities because of COVID and the impact that had. So we're prepared for that. We were prepared for that in 2020. I'm sure, like most schools, admissions committees come together, for retreats to look back at the year, to make adjustments and prepare for the upcoming year. So we do that annually, and we did it in late May, early June, and given where we were, we did it virtually. We discussed all the measures that we were going to implement going forward, and how it was important to exercise flexibility. And the committee was good about that. It said, yeah, and everybody was, we were all impacted in some way, obviously, even those on the committee. As we proceeded over the course of the year, as we were interviewing candidates, for example, we took that into consideration, and given at what point they were in the application process, and but we didn't see a lot of applicants lacking experience, as perhaps we anticipated, simply because they started this back in 2018 and 19, and now we're into the application process in 2020. So where we're going to have to make some adjustments, I think, is this year, because I think the pool coming in this year might have been affected. Now, there may be some exceptions. There'll be a subset, I think, of applicants that are more non-traditional, may have taken gap years, that were obviously affected but had some experience. So we're going to see the lot in that way. But how we train, once again, we have training modules, and we do in-person training of our faculty. We've been doing it virtually. to make them aware of the current circumstances. And then you have us, in those committee meetings, to kind of be that check and balance, to monitor the discussion, to make sure that, that they're not looking at it in a somewhat austere or very limiting, way. And that's helped over the course of the 2020 cycle, just reminding our committee members, this is not the typical year, and we've all agreed that we're going to have to exercise flexibility here, given the current circumstances. The committee was very, very good about that over the course of time. And as a result, we interviewed a record number of applicants, and we're indeed fortunate that, we captured a really good class going into 2021.
Yeah.
So we're going to do similarly.
Yeah, that's great. Lyman, anything that you did special for your committee in going into 2020, or what do you anticipate in terms of your committee process going into 21? What are you doing to prepare the committee to understand what the expectations are that they might have of students that might be different from past years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the conversation that as a team, the committee really will have and has had on an ongoing basis is to respond really to the question or the provocation that I give them all the time of why exactly is it that you would expect a candidate to have A, B, or C on their application? So what is it that you think would be salient about seeing hospital volunteer experience or work experience as an EMT? What about that? Let's capture what that really is and make sure that candidates are educated that as they fill out their applications, what they should be trying to capture is not so much whether or not they've checked the box of an adequate number of hours of volunteering or an adequate number of hours of exposure to medicine through shadowing or other types of opportunities. But if they're able to successfully communicate how what they have done really does lend itself to some substantive pre-professional preparation in terms of developing skills and attributes that we expect our students to have going forward. So really articulating that discussion with the committee, I think, is very important. From the perspective of DO schools, we are among the osteopathic medical colleges that do not require applicants to have a letter from an osteopathic physician. I think certainly for Michigan residents, we probably expect a fair amount of more in-depth exposure to interaction with osteopathic physicians, just given the density of DOs historically here within the state. But beyond that, we certainly expect that candidates who are going to be good candidates will find other ways to advance in their application, specifically what may grab them about osteopathic approaches to medicine, or what about an osteopathic philosophy or the tenets of osteopathic medicine may really inform who they want to be as they think about their future professional identity. So I think communicating those types of elements will be really critical for applicants going forward. And so I think that as the committee discusses this issue, as this is an issue that my office discusses with applicants and with pre-medical groups, I think it's an opportunity for everybody to break outside of some of these norms to some degree and think a little bit more creatively, not just about, well, this is what you do as a pre-medical student, but to think about what that's really supposed to demonstrate and to be more creative about finding some other opportunities to demonstrate those same skills and attributes and capacities, which medical schools and organizations, I think, have done a good job of articulating to that population in terms of what it is schools ideally would like to see in their classes. So I think this will be a unique opportunity for students who are willing to take a little more time to stop and think about what they expect to communicate to schools. And if they're successful in that, I think that those are the students that will have a very good application cycle in the coming year.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's good advice for the students. Absolutely. Leila, we talk a lot about admissions committees and I'm guessing that your committee is similar to others where you have a variety of people on the committee in terms of clinicians and basic scientists and A lot of schools even have students on their committees. So you have a mixture of these kind of people, but they've all got one thing in common, it seems to me like, and that is they've been subject to the limitations of the pandemic. And so it sort of seems to me like, and I'd like for you to not only address kind of what the others have said, but also just the notion that we're all in this together. We're all having to kind of deal with all the same thing. And so the students can expect that this is not going to be a big surprise to your committee that they haven't been able to do X, Y, or Z. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I think too, I think sometimes applicants, it's a scary thing to think about an admissions process or an admissions committee, right? We're so sort of obscure and this kind of scary process. Oftentimes applicants are even concerned about reaching out to admissions offices. They don't know if they're supposed to do that. And of course we encourage them to do that. But I think reminding applicants that they're compassionate humans that serve on admissions committees. It's one of the hardest, if not the hardest working committee at a medical school. And so they care deeply about what they're doing in their work. You know, and as a new medical school, one of the things that's amazing is being able to be so mission driven. So when we talk about these experiences that might be different in the upcoming year, it's helping them remember our mission. And there is no defined number of clinical exposure experiences that will tell us alone whether that's a mission aligned candidate. So I think it's helping them remember. We actually pretty loosely define things. We don't have a specific requirement for clinical experiences for a reason, because we believe that there are different ways people can demonstrate that they have exposure and their motivation. Furthermore, we want to attract a diverse group of people to serve the diverse population we have in Washington. And when we're too prescriptive, we're going to miss some real opportunities from applicants. So for example, for clinical experience, we will look at people that have had experience serving as care providers for family members and nothing else. If that's the only exposure they have, that aligns with what we're looking for, obviously provided in this holistic way that they have other aspects as well. But I think it's really just continuing to remind the committee that applicants, just like any of us, have lost a lot of control over things in our lives and opportunities. I think also it's really important, and this is something we've done here, is make a concerted effort to reach out to our pre-health advisors that in Washington, we focus on Washington, so we focused on those in Washington, and ask them what are your students experiencing, what challenges do they have, help us understand so that we can relay that to the committee. Ultimately, the admissions committee, they're typically they're not the experts in admissions. They rely on us as the experts in admissions to relay the information to them that they should be considering. So bringing forth what we're hearing from pre-health advisors has been really helpful. The other thing that we've done, and I know many medical schools have, is we added a question to our secondary application about COVID. What was the impact of COVID on their lives? And we made it broad enough that they could share what they wanted to share. And that was really helpful for the committee to better understand the sometimes very direct impacts, or even just the reflection that applicants had about the impact on their lives or the gratitude and other sort of attributes or reflections. So, I think it's continuing to have the conversations. It's seeking out the insights from others, other stakeholders. We also have community members on our admissions committees that have no relationship to medicine. They're superintendents of school districts. They're in other positions, and they bring such a unique lens to our decision making. And I think that, like you said, the diversity of the admissions committee is really helpful to help ground us about our work and the ultimate goal to, bring in ultimately mission-aligned candidates.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm wondering, Leila, in terms of the interview process, and I'm going to pose this to everyone also, is that I'm wondering how COVID and interviewing virtually changed the way or the type of interviews that you do. Leila, what kind of interviews did you do prior to COVID? Were they one-on-one? Was it MMI? What was that looking like? And did it change at all under the new sort of COVID-related virtual interviewing process?
Sure. So prior to the pandemic, we used an MMI model. It was a hybrid MMI with a structured one-on-one interwoven within the cycle, or the circuit, I should say. So my team actually did a few virtual MMIs. It's resource intensive in person. It's highly resource intensive virtually, and it's fraught with all kinds of issues with technology. So we actually incorporated the AAMC Vita this year. And the reason we did that, we very much believe in a multiple assessment model, which is what the MMI gives you. It gives you independent assessments, and several of them, so that you have multiple lenses into the applicant. And it's a highly structured, which is supported by the research literature. So we wanted to use, given that we were going to transition from the MMI in the virtual setting, Vita gave us the other opportunity to still have that multiple assessment model, and that's highly structured and scenario and competency based. So we use the Vita, which is 6 competency stations, and then 2 live virtual highly structured interviews. So we still had 8 independent assessments for each applicant. I'll tell you, that's what's interesting is hearing colleagues say that there is potential they will continue in this virtual interview process indefinitely. Like, this really worked out. The feedback we got from applicants was they felt it was more equitable. That really took off the strain and stress of finances, of all kinds of things. And so, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see what schools choose to do after this cycle related to interviewing.
Yeah, good. Lyman, you want to chime in on that? What about you guys at Michigan State? How did COVID change the way you interview students?
Yeah, so in years past, we had an MMI style in-person half-day interview day. And when push came to shove and we knew that we needed to pivot for this last application cycle, I think we really went back to basics and wanted to really rethink what it is that we hoped to get from an interview experience. And knowing that we were entering sort of a long, dark period where we were going to have limited engagement opportunities, I think we really wanted to find an opportunity to build some community bonds with the wider college network. And so we really leaned heavily into a group of interviewers that we had never been able to really engage before. And that's the extraordinary network of alumni that we have around the world. So having a virtual interview this year allowed us to move to a one-to-one format where we had sort of a structured conversation between the interviewer and the candidates in a way that I think leaned into what was good and useful about the technology. I had some reservations about how well a online MMI type of experience could be run. As Dr. Harrison points out, of course, it's an extraordinarily resource-intensive operation to run in any case, but certainly doing so in a virtual environment, I think presents some very unique challenges that are quite difficult to overcome. But more from the applicant side, I was worried that the quality of the experience there would be very poor and that it would come off more as an assessment rather than an opportunity for there to be some genuine give and take, because we weren't bringing people to campus and we weren't giving them an opportunity to see facilities. So we changed this whole strategy really in a sense because we wanted to give candidates an opportunity to present themselves in a way that they felt was reflective of who they are and their experiences and the unique things that they wanted to contribute. So I think this process this past year gave applicants a little bit more control, put them a little bit more in the driver's seat in terms of being able to share with us what they thought was most salient, rather than the older model where we really developed scenarios, we developed competencies we were looking at, we had these specific structures that we were trying to assess. And I think we successfully moved away from that in a way that has built some stronger community bonds. And so we've certainly had good experiences with the feedback that we've gotten. Candidates have really enjoyed this, our interviewers have really enjoyed this. So I think that this has been successful from the standpoint of bringing people into the larger Michigan State community in a really profound way. It's been very, very positive for people in an environment where otherwise we haven't been able to have the kinds of sustained interactions that we might otherwise really be trying to engender in the pool.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I will note that we also asked candidates interviewing this year to take the Casper situational judgment test so that we had an additional data point for the committee that was MMI style information in terms of the way that particular exam will assess for some of the structures that we would typically be trying to assess for with respect to an in-person MMI process. So we gave our committee access to a little bit of that data, but I think we really recalibrated around a different idea of what the interview could achieve for the committee and for what positive and sort of salubrious effects we could have, not just for the committee, but also for the broader community with our alumni and also our future student doctors.
Yeah, excellent. Now, Philo, I know that you guys were using MMI no, that's not right.
Nope.
Okay, I thought you were. I don't know why. I don't know
Nope.
why I was thinking.
I mean, we thought about it, but we never went down that way. Now we've adapted some aspects of MMI, and Leila may remember that. When she was assistant dean at A&M, we obviously made our interviews very structured. And what we've embedded in the interview process are scenarios and with guiding questions and essentially assessing behaviors. And we've gone further in that regard, really moving around throughout the 4 categories that we're evaluating in terms of creating scenarios that are relevant to that particular category. We have a subcommittee of the admissions committee that's committed to creating these scenarios on a pretty regular basis now so that we can change them out on a regular basis over the course of the interviewing season, which I think is effective. And at the same time, what we're trying to determine is if there is some correlation or some relationship between the responses or the way the committee evaluates candidates within these scenario situations in Casper. And then subsequent to that, what we've added, besides the traditional one-on-one interviews, so we give each candidate 2 30-minute one-on-one interactions. And then we've added what we call a standardized patient exercise. And essentially what that means is that each candidate gets 2 5-minute encounters with our trained standardized patients. Now, our standardized patients are trained by our staff and experts at our Clinical Learning Resource Center. So what we've done is met with their team to give them, wanted them to get a sense of what we're looking for in the candidate in these, one-on-one, very brief kind of situations. Again, these are scenario-based, so the staff there creates the scenarios based on our input. But they're very benign, they're not being asked, questions that obviously they can't answer, like clinical issues or clinical questions, something like a medical student would have to do in an OSCE exam. But they are actually patterned after the OSCE, in a sense, where they have that 5-minute encounter, there's that exchange, their video taped or filmed, and then if we have to, we can go back and take a look at that interaction. But the standardized patients are trained on how to evaluate and then submit that evaluation, which we have access to at the time of our committee meeting deliberations, so that we can take that information along with, the actual one-on-one interviews that are obviously very structured as well. So what we're doing now with Altus Assessments, the creator of Casper, is working with them on analyzing our data over the course of 4 years with regard to Casper and how we're using that in selecting applicants and how we consider, that score in our admissions deliberations. But we're going to see if there's any relationship as well with the standardized patient exercises. If there is some relationship there, well, that's fantastic. And we see some parity there. We see that we're going in the right direction and we're selecting students that align with our core values. The Aggie core values are particularly important at A&M, and we embrace those. And that's respect, excellence, leadership, loyalty, integrity, and selfless service. So that the one at the very top, respect, and then of course selfless service are particularly important to us. So the part of the whole process to really look deep into how respect is manifested, how selfless service is manifested over the course of their experiences. So that's what we're doing. Again, taking into consideration those two important traits of holistic review, attributes and experiences, and really going a little deeper, taking that deep dive to see just how those are being, exercised.
Yeah. Now you're requiring Casper of your
Yes.
students, is that right?
In fact, most of the TMDS schools have now gone to requiring Casper, which is interesting.
I see. Now, Lyman, I think you said that you guys are requiring Casper as well. Leila, is Washington State is doing Casper also?
We're one of the 8 medical schools that are doing the research study with the AAMC, who is also building a situational judgment test. So we are holding out, and if the SAT, they're in their second pilot year, but if they roll it out as an official, we are holding out for the AAMC SAT because we're a research school. We know that they're evaluating outcome data as the students involved are matriculating to medical school, so that we would hold out for that one.
Okay, good. So the plan is to involve some sort of situational judgment test that students would be required to do. I see. Okay, great. I know that one of the things that you mentioned, I think one of you did, and I'm wondering if all of you are the same, is in terms of including on your secondary application, if you have one, a question about COVID and how it's affected you in the process. Do all 3 of you have a secondary where you're asking something similar to that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You do. Lyman, you're shaking your head now.
I think I'm the exception on this. So we do not have a secondary application question specifically related to COVID. So on the ACOMAS application, that is captured, and that is still the plan at the level of all osteopathic schools. Is to give candidates an opportunity to articulate, especially what their circumstances are and how that might have been impacted by the pandemic. We will have other opportunities on our secondary application, of course, to provide other types of contextualization, some of which may be pandemic related, some of which may not be, which is why I think we've neglected to give it that level of specificity, just so the candidates know that they have other information to share, that it doesn't have to be tied to that particular qualifier.
Right. Right. And Leila, you guys do have a secondary, I take it.
We do, and that question is on our application.
Yeah, great. So I would like to sort of round out my questions to you guys, and then I think maybe we might have enough time to grab a couple of questions from students that have chimed in. What do you want students to know? What if you're talking to around 500, 600 students live now, and other hundreds or thousands are going to be watching it over the course of the next weeks and months. What is your message to these students about how nervous they are about how COVID is affecting everything? What would you like, a nugget of wisdom or truth that you would like to communicate to these students out there, and would really like to hear that? And Leila, why don't you start us off with that? If you could, what message do you have for these kids?
I would say that to know that admissions offices, deans, admissions committees really are thoughtful about what circumstances applicants are coming with. And so just, I know, again, it seems like this obscure process, but just know that there are humans behind the scenes that really do care and are thoughtful and really are trying to be careful and considerate about what things might look like in this upcoming cycle. And the second thing I would share is a reminder that there is no one perfect pathway into medicine. I think a lot of times, in particular traditional applicants, there's a lot of pressure on them, either self-imposed or otherwise, that they should be enrolling into medical school right after college, that gap years look bad. There's all sorts of advice, there's all sorts of opinions. And what I would say is that I think the majority of medical schools would say that there is no one perfect pathway. If this is not the year, if it's too complicated, there is nothing wrong with waiting. so I would just say don't pressure yourself to make it happen this year if it's not the right year for you, because we don't look at it in that way.
Excellent, excellent. Philo, what about you? What about what message do you have for our applicants?
Okay. Well, we understand that there are going to be limitations in terms of experiences, but that doesn't mean that you still can't seek out experiences, even if they are virtual. And we've seen a lot of opportunities surface that we believe are virtual. We like the applicants to take that initiative. We think that's important. If this is truly, at least in their mind and heart, what they want to do, we see applicants making those sacrifices. Going the extra yard or two, to acquire, experience and knowledge, about the profession. So I think it's important to continue to explore. In fact, I think there are more opportunities to get involved in the community than there may be, to get involved in a healthcare capacity simply because of the limitations, given COVID. I'm involved in the community. I'm out there even, virtually, and you can still do it. You're masked, you're socially distanced, and community organizations are really good at rotating volunteers so that they can continue to help even in person. So take advantage of those. Our core value of self-resource is particularly important. I think of any activity, we think that's really key right there, that you care about people, that you're definitely showing that and manifesting that in your experiences. Another thing that I think is important is to understand the career that you're going to pursue. Study the issues. Sometimes we scratch our heads in confusion sometimes when applicants can't hold a really good, clear conversation or dialogue about some of the issues impacting medicine. And there's some really good resources out, including the AAMC and the American Medical Association. Even there's some good journals out there, like the Journal of the American Medical Association. Even your local medical association or the statewide medical association, like ours, the TMA, is a wealth of information. The Health Resources and Services Administration, excellent resource for what's going on right now, particularly with regard to the pandemic and the issue of disparities, especially among people of color in marginal, communities. The National Institutes of Health, the U.S. National Library of Medicine, these are wonderful resources. Sometimes perhaps applicants don't even think about as they're, navigating the internet and looking, for opportunities. These are excellent resources, and they're easy, to get. So that would be what I would, recommend to students moving forward, especially in 2021, given the current circumstances.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And Lyman, what do you think about this? Chime in here.
Sure. I'll try to be really succinct in some actionable advice here. I mentioned earlier, I think one of the essential features of good candidates over the coming years will be creativity. And so I think that it's two things. It's being creative in seeking opportunities to be engaged in appropriate ways, whether that's appropriate ways to engage in clinical environments or exposure to medicine, or appropriate engagement in volunteer or leadership or research activities, those types of things. But beyond that, the challenge that applicants, I think, are going to face, that they need to lean into in a positive way, is really understanding that you are now going to have to communicate a little bit more comprehensively and a little bit more thoroughly about how explicitly you want to connect the things that you have done to the competencies that schools expect you to demonstrate in your application materials. And I think the most successful candidates will be the ones that take an unconventional background or an unconventional set of exposures and opportunities and really demonstrate how that links up to the type of preparation that a particular school, especially in a mission-driven institution, really wants to see. And I think that candidates who do that well have a unique opportunity here. So I think that's maybe the silver lining to this as well, too. Gets us away from some of the sort of arms race type of dialogue that oftentimes undergraduate students in particular sort of end up in. I think this presents a special opportunity for people to think a little bit differently, and articulate strengths in a new and sort of advantageous way.
You guys have very good advice for these applicants who are super nervous and cautious about what things have what things they've done and are expected to be doing. And I appreciate the transparency that you've had today with regard to your process and how things are going to work. And I think the pandemic has caught us all somewhat off guard, and I think it's changed a lot of what the admissions process may look like in years to come. And Philo, you addressed it early on about here in Texas, how the deadlines is a good example. That process has changed and may not ever go back to the way it was. And I suspect that many schools are going to be continuing to do virtual interviews or offering that as an option to students because they've seen that it works and that it is a really a process that provides a lot greater ability for students to interview with you who may have had a difficulty traveling or whatever otherwise. So these are exciting days for all of us, for the students and for you guys, but congratulations on the flexibility that the medical schools have shown, I think, as well as these dear candidates that are applying to go into medicine have shown in terms of being flexible and all that. So I want to thank our guests today. It's been wonderful to have you on today as our guest, Lyman Mower from Michigan State. Thank you for being with us today, and best wishes with your class for the 21 entering class. I'm sure you're still right in the middle of trying to put that class together as all of you are. Philo, thank you, and I appreciate your efforts here in the great state of Texas, and I'll put a plug in for the Lone Star State there, but thank you for joining us today. And then Leila up there in the Pacific Northwest, thank you for doing all that you do and for the efforts, and congratulations on, I believe I'm right in saying that you're graduating your first class this year. Is that right?
We sure are. It's an exciting time.
Yeah, that is very exciting. I'm super pumped about that. So congrats on that. That's really wonderful, and I'm sure it's been thrilling to build a brand new medical school.
A lot of work.
Yeah, I'm sure it has been. Excellent. Well, thank you all. I want to encourage all of you to mark your calendar for next month, April 28th, same time. Same, when I was growing up, it was same bat time, same bat channel. That was the Batman thing from the Batman shows on TV, but same time, same channel, YouTube TV. Next month, we're going to be looking at the one question about letters of recommendation and committee letters. How does this work out? What letters look like? What should they look like? How do you get good letters? And do I do a committee letter or not do a committee letter if my school offers it? So we're going to focus in next month just on the issue of letters of recommendation and examine that as we've done this time for the issues of COVID. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you to all the students for hanging around. It's great for having you here, and we'll see you next month on the 28th.